Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the June Enterprise Risk Management Toolbox webinar. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. If you've dialed in by phone but haven't logged in by web, and you'd like to see the slides and videos that will be shown during the presentation, please point your web browser to readytalk.com. In the box where it says Participant Join a Meeting, enter the same access code that you used for the call, 9879821. We are leaving the phone lines open, so please stay aware of the level of background noise in your area, and if it starts to get noisy, please put your phone on mute. If your phone doesn't have a mute button, you can use the ReadyTalk controls, which are *6 to mute and *7 to unmute. I will also be monitoring the phone lines and can individually mute lines if they become noisy, but it makes it a lot smoother if folks keep an eye on their own line. If you are called away from the phone, please do not put your phone on hold. If you do, that will cause your hold music to be played to everybody else on the call. You can simply hang up, and when you're free, you can dial back in again, and it will not disrupt the call. With that, I will hand the controls over to Erike Young, who is our Director of Environment, Health, and Safety here at UCOP. Erike?
I actually took myself off mute there. Well, welcome everyone to our Toolbox talk for this month. The topic this month is Everyone is a Risk Manager, and it's really enterprise risk management basics. And so this is going to be somewhat, if you want to call it a back to basics course. That's kind of where we're at. And I think the audience, obviously most of the audience members we typically have are those that are involved with the ERM program for some time, whether that's at their own campus or maybe other institutions. And so what I would encourage you to do with this, as this is recorded, once it's available, is I would probably share it to those that are not in the risk management program and to maybe your business officials and others, because that's really what the intent is as we kind of go through, is to kind of keep it at a somewhat of a basic level. How does this work more in the academic institutions, and also review how we've obviously incorporated enterprise risk management into that. So when we look at the University of California, or any university for that matter, there's lots of different activities, and if you really think about it, university is essentially a small city. Most of our universities have our own zip codes, and as the slides indicate, we have all the different functions that you typically expect: a classroom, teaching environment, which is hopefully fairly low risk. And then, of course, there might be the laboratories that might be part of some of that teaching environment. And as well with the University of California, with the number of researchers we have, that's an extensive part of what we do and who we are is that research area. As well as if you want to separate out the medical centers, just even on our own campuses, though, we also offer, we have student health clinics, we have occupational health clinics, so we certainly have that type of exposure. And then the little smaller picture on the left-hand side is really more of a demonstration of, a food service. System-wide, we have about 4,000 employees that work in our dining services program. And then if you add custodial services that go part of that. And so what's not seen on here is really all the support mechanisms that really go into running a university that help support the mission of education, research, and public service. Along with that, for most people who've seen A Beautiful Mind, maybe you've seen that movie in the past, and if you kind of think about it, that's probably describes what our researchers are really doing. With innovation comes risk. And so that's a challenge any university would have, especially with the research environment, is how do we manage that type of risk in the context of encouraging innovation? And a lot of times where we get, I guess you might say, challenged is, or at least in the past when we think about risk management, is that our job is to say no, or at least that's the perception, is that we're risk averse and we're not willing to take on new risks. And so for those that attended our risk summit a couple weeks ago, our theme this year was learn to take more risk. And what the idea is that we really don't want to be risk averse. We need to be innovative. If we're going to create the next new cancer treatment or the cure for cancer or cure for the various diseases that are out there, then there is going to be risk involved with that. But and we need to have the innovation as part of that. And I think most people realize within a university community and in almost any organization, the challenge that we have are the traditional silos, and that's really when we talk about enterprise risk management is really we talk about tearing down the silos, and what does that look like from that perspective? And I guess there are some things that are natural where the silos are broken down, where it makes sense because operational needs would make that occur. An example would be on a campus with student activities. Typically, most campuses on a daily basis have some type of student activity in a quad area or some other type of, whether it be a fraternity, sorority type of activity with the various clubs. And the challenge is, well, how do you manage some of the activities that they have on there? So let's give an example of if they're going to have a Taco Tuesday or something like that in the quad. And when they're doing that, now you have the different departments. You have event planning might be part of that. Student affairs might be part of that. There might be some fees associated with what they're doing. If they're going to be serving food, now the Environment, Health, and Safety Department, they're going to have ensure that the food safety, from a health standpoint, that people are properly handling the food. There might be some also environmental concerns based upon what they're doing, if they're going to be proper disposal of maybe any liquids or oils, things like that, so they're not just dumping it down a storm drain. And the other part is if it's a larger activity or evening activity, well, maybe police department gets involved, or maybe the fire department or the fire marshal might also be involved. And so typically most of those silos have been broken down, maybe more out of, because of the necessity to have an activity like that. But there's so many other things that where people may not recognize that there really are those silos that are up there. And I would say and I'll give an example of one of those here in a moment. Now, of course, we always have one of our favorite slides that we typically like to show that as part of the process and what we have traditionally tried to do. Of what we're trying to do, and really what ERM is trying to do is how do we recognize those silos? How do we break down the walls that traditionally have always been up, and even the ones we may not see that are part of that? And so with that, from a process standpoint, I think most people again recognize that are familiar with the ERM process, but for those that might be new, that this might be shown to, is what are we talking about when we talk about a risk management process and what the ERM process is? Well, first of all, on the very top bubble there, or circle, is identify your objectives. And I think this has probably been the challenge that a lot of departments within the university have probably struggled with in some cases the most. Even though as our mission is to provide education, research, and public service is the university mission. But then how do we tie those into the specific objectives of that department? And how does what we do, and for my example with EH&S, how do we support the mission of research and education? And that's really the key component to this whole piece of it. And the reason why I bring this up is when we think about, again, from a research standpoint, an example that I'll give is recently we had a challenge where the Department of Justice, California Department of Justice, changed their interpretation of rules on what we call precursor chemicals or precursor controlled substances. And the idea behind this ruling is that a while back there was rules about methamphetamines and other type of drugs or chemicals that can be used to make or be precursors to make other types of drugs. Well, in the process of doing this interpretation, essentially became really more of a legal battle, at least it was perceived as being a legal battle that we would have to go through. And it was going to slow down our research to where our researchers wouldn't be able to get these precursors, and essentially would possibly, with the grants they had in place, they wouldn't be able to do the type of research that they're doing. So this was really a major obstacle to one of the objectives of our research area. And so we actually had a meeting with legal and involved, since EH&S oversees the Controlled Substances Program, and we also had our research folks there. But then we also invited procurement. And a lot of people were curious why procurement was there, because this is a legal issue. Why would they be involved with the discussion? Well, as it ends up, it was procurement department that actually solved the problem for us. And as most things, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's, if it looked like a legal issue, that's how it was being approached. But procurement actually came in with a different focus and identified, well, what does the law say? How can we get around it? Or I would say get around, it's not the proper term, but how can we use, the law to our advantage in this case? So what they were actually able to do was to find other suppliers, because the law allows, as long as you get the supplies from within California, that we wouldn't have to go through all the hoops that the Department of Justice was requiring us to, and it would ultimately make our researchers happy. And probably for the first time ever, I know Peter Taylor was at a meeting, our CFO, and actually got a compliment from a researcher saying, thank you for helping with this issue to get this resolved. And that was really an example of how ERM and how this process really works, is in breaking down those silos as an example there. So when we look at on the risk management process, again, managing or identifying the objectives is obviously the first part that I just mentioned. But how do we identify the potential risks that are involved with the various activities? And again, thinking of everyone as a risk manager as part of this, for the risk management department to do this would actually be too difficult to identify all those, and that's really where all the departments need to play a role in this, and identifying the risks, and also identifying the players that are involved with those various risks to make this happen. After identifying the risks, examining alternative risk control methods, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, as well as then we're going to be selecting the method and then monitor the results and make changes accordingly. And of course, we understand that this is a continuous process, and that's really what we're looking at when we talk about the ERM program and how we move forward. On the types of risks, I think, again, most people, when they think about risk management, unfortunately think just about hazard risk and what do we buy insurance for. And of course, for those that are involved with the ERM program, we know that there's a lot of other risks, such as compliance, reputation, financial, and strategic risks that we really try to focus on. But the challenge that we have is how do we get others in those other departments that are not part of the risk management department to understand these concepts. And again, that's the intent of really how do we get that information out to them to change their view on this. And so again, from an operational standpoint, typically hazard risk would fall under that. So there are some things, that's probably the only area that we might be able to buy insurance for to help mitigate some of those risks. And maybe with on the compliance risk side, there's probably not necessarily insurance, but that's the regulatory risk, those type of things that we need to be concerned about. Reputational risk, again, there's no insurance really you can buy for that because some cases the damage can be just so great that no amount of money, monetary recovery will really help with a situation like that. On the financial risk side, there might be some hedging or some other type of leveraging that can be done from as a risk tool or risk financing tool. And then finally, the other strategic risk is the other. And so going back to the previous slide, when we think about where we move forward with identifying the objectives and the programs, again, it's how do we get people to move forward and start thinking differently? It's really a paradigm shift is what we're asking people to do, not only at breaking down the silos, but also even to think about risk differently from these operational levels. And then finally, when we talk about what the next step, we identify the risk, well, what are we going to do about it? And how do we, again, train people to make those decisions? Because unfortunately, I think most people are taking on risk, and it's unknown risk to them. And going back to the theme of learning how to take more risk, this is really all part of that process. And so from a risk treatment standpoint, we can certainly accept the risk that we're going to move forward on it. And when we accept it, that might be, I would say, we're retaining the risk is probably from a self-insured standpoint. We might also transfer the risk, and that's the insurance side. The mitigation, I think almost anything we try to do, we're always mitigating risk through our loss control programs, and we have several examples of those. And then finally, we can certainly avoid the risk of not doing that activity at all and having another organization take that risk on. In most cases, I would say, at least in a university environment, we rarely avoid taking, from a risk treatment standpoint, we usually don't use that option. It's really, on most cases, I would say that we are mostly accepting and transferring and mitigating all those risks. But the issue is to what degree and how do all those programs work together. Now, I know most have all seen a similar slide to this that we typically show, and that's our cost of risk. And really, this is more of a demonstration of how ERM program can create value, and how do you measure the success of your programs to move forward. And I think the latest numbers over the past, I think, 6 years now, it's over 600 million, it might be 650 million, is what we've been able to reduce the total cost of risk by. And I think that, again, it's a testament of people working together, breaking down those silos, whether they be in EH&S and research and those departments. And, we'll give an example. I think some folks may have heard about, when we show this, people warning, this is an olive tree, of how do we turn a risk into an opportunity, or how do we create value in these type of situations. And I think this is a great success story, turning something that was a bad situation into a positive one. And so on the Davis campus, there's olive trees all over the place. And at certain times of the year, unfortunately, the olives will start, the pits, or the, I don't know, proper term is, will start falling. Just the fruit, we would say, is falling from the tree. And as you know, Davis being one of those, probably the most bicycle-friendly campus, this becomes an issue, both for people walking and for riding bikes, whether for them to fall or trip and creates an injury. And so this has always been an annual issue that the Davis campus has had to deal with. And so one of the things that, one of the solutions that they came up with is, well, if we're going to have to, pick up all these things and do something, well, maybe we can do something different. And so you can actually now buy I think it's the President's, can't remember the actual name, but President's olive oil, President's Blend olive oil is what it's called, if you remember. And that is something now that is being sold. And so creating what could be seen as a negative situation, and now we've taken that cleanup activity and turned it into to really creating value. And that's just a good example. When you take a look at the various risks that a campus may have, or a university might have, how do we flip it on its head and turn it into an opportunity? I'll give another example of what we're doing also with laboratory safety. Laboratory safety sometimes can, especially from a faculty standpoint and the rules of compliance, might be one of those challenges of why, we have to follow all these rules. But if we flip that on how do we create value for the university, how can we sell that idea that, having, safer lab, providing lab coats, doing all these things, how do we make that an opportunity for us? Well, and now from a recruitment standpoint, to be able to advertise that we have the safest, laboratories, that we also from a hiring standpoint, that families or pharmaceutical companies will want to hire our students. That's how we create value. And so we kind of, again, turn something that might be seen as a negative of rule compliance, things like that, into a positive, saying, look, you're going to have more of your students graduate. You might have more partnerships with pharmaceutical companies. The university itself will hopefully be the university of choice by parents to send their kids to when they're looking at various campuses. And if we, from a safety standpoint, that can certainly be a big selling point as part of that. And so one of the competitions that we always talk about, when we talk about creating value in the ERM program, this has actually been, was part of a Risk Summit competition last year. And just a little video to kind of demonstrate some of the value and how ERM moves.
Are you having that 2:30 feeling? Do you know what mid-afternoon feels like? Have you hit the wall? Frustrated with your continuity planning for disruptive events? Tired with your risk management program? Depressed with your risk control effectiveness? Try new 5-Hour ERM, the only energy drink on the market that can solve your enterprise risk management program needs. Available at vending machines everywhere. It's 100% sugar-free, has zero aftertaste, no side effects, and it's less filling. Now available in flavors to meet all your ERM needs, including UC Action, UC Tracker, and UC Ready. It's also available in 5 new risk assessment tool flavors. You'll get hours of ERM solutions now and no 2:30 feeling later. Try 5-Hour ERM.
So part of, I mean, and actually we'll probably send out some slides. There's actually the Risk Summit link, and I was looking at some of the other presentations that we have on there, and they're really good demonstrations of what we're talking about when we talk about ERM, and whether breaking down the silos or as an example with the video, of making, your programs easier to manage and those type of things, which really goes to what we call our field of dreams. And you've probably heard in the past, we always thought, build it and they will come was the idea with the field of dreams. And that's the idea that we basically ran with when we developed our ERM program. And I would say that's to a certain extent that most institutions outside of UC that are looking at doing this kind of will look at probably having to do something similar, or of course, use the tools that we've developed as well as part of that. And the idea of when we talk about the field of dreams is what was mentioned in the video. UC Tracker, developing tools that help conduct risk assessments. At the last risk assessment 2 weeks ago, John Gray introduced our new risk assessment or risk appetite tool that's part of that. And again, we're trying to make this whole ERM thing easier for everyone to understand and really hold their hand through the process. Because if you're expecting everyone to be a risk manager, and as much as we want to say that, you also need to provide the tools to make it happen. And while training can be obviously is a huge part of that, and that's where the risk summits come in, but the tools really have to be on that. So as someone just indicated about the video, we'll certainly we'll send out a link to the YouTube site that's a Risk Summit 2012 site that we've developed, and we'll make sure that everyone gets a copy because there's about 60 videos up there, and of course that was one of the better ones that we put out there, but there's plenty out there that will help sell the idea of what ERM is and what we're trying to do. So again, when we talk about the field of dreams, all the different tools, on the EH&S side, we're certainly developing a risk assessment tool to develop standard operating procedures to help better manage the research that we're doing now. So we're certainly doing all those type of activities as part of that process. On the other part that we, again, to make life easy for those that want to, implement ERM, is we've actually made it a one-stop shop. And so what we call is our My Managed Risk Portal, or MMR, is a portal that allows, single sign-on from our employee base, and then they can access all the tools that are out there. There'll be the various links that helps to have descriptions on them. And so what you're seeing on the screen is what we call our placemat. And it really describes all the different services that we have available on really just one sheet and describes how they can use those various tools. We've actually modified this a bit to where on the back side now it actually explains a little bit more what those tools are. But certainly someone can go in and see the different services that are provided. And these are really all the things that Risk Services does, as well as our ancillary departments that are part of that. You'll notice also the ERM Help Desk. The ERM Help Desk is, while obviously for UC employees, we've actually take calls for those that are using the tools from outside other institutions as well. So they'll be more than happy to help take the calls if you have questions about some of the tools that are part of that. And so we've really tried to create a one-stop shop as part of that whole process. As far as technology direction, and I mentioned the ERM Service Desk or the helpline, that was just part of that. This is actually the ERM Service Desk team it's staffed to where they are pretty responsive, and in some cases within several minutes we get an answer or solution to a problem. But they're all briefed on all the different service tools or products that we have out there to help do the risk assessments and to help move that forward. And then one of the things we're continuing to promote, again, when we talk about how do we spread the word and get information out there, this last year we started ERM University. Really the first part of this was at the Risk Summit, where we had, it was intended for those outside the UC system to learn more about what we're doing within our ERM program and to help provide some tools and some context to help others start their journey on their ERM program. And one of the elements that we also have started this last year is with the change in the Associate Risk Management designation, is that I'm actually hosting and teaching this course at ERM University. It's going to be ERM 55 as the next course, which is on risk assessment and treatment, and it's an online course that will begin July 18th. The information to register is on the screen, and you can certainly take advantage of the course. And what I would add about this is for those that have had their ARM or in the past, that the textbook is completely changed, and the new focus, where it used to focus on hazard risk, the focus now is on enterprise risk management. And so the first risk management principles and practices, which is the first course, ARM 54 now, the whole language has changed. So as you see here, instead of risk control, which was the old title, it's now risk assessment and treatment is the title name. So the whole lexicon of how risk managers are talking is changed, and it's important that we want to make sure we offer that training for employees. Now, whether they decide that they're going to get their ARM designation or not, I think the information, if nothing else, to provide the opportunities for your staff to learn and to grow, again, will only help your ERM program continue in the future. So, again, the idea behind this session was to really go back to basics. When we talk about an ERM program, since we do have several new folks that have joined the Toolbox Talks, and wanted to, again, the idea is to encourage you to make this available, to take the recording and even some of the YouTube links if they're helpful, and show it to those outside of your risk management department. And so you can start having that discussion of what ERM is all about. As well as if you'd like us to come out and do a talk to your staff, we certainly have the resources to do that, both from campus level. We have Carrie Cranston from UC Santa Barbara, who is now a Center of Excellence for our ERM program. And so we can certainly leverage her to come out, or certainly myself or any others in our department, to talk more about how you might be able to implement ERM effectively in your organization, or even have that first discussion on what the program might look like if you're to implement in your organization. So with that, I will certainly take any questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We will be sending out a follow-up after this webinar, giving that link for anyone who's interested in registering for the ARM class, and also giving the link to the Risk Summit 2012 YouTube page if you'd like to see the video again. So, if there are any questions, we can take those. And if there are not, I think we will wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for dialing in to join us. Thank you, Erike, for presenting. And we hope to see you all at future Toolbox webinars.
And thank you for making it fun to learn. I mean, those cans and those people's, their pain was tangible, and I mean, I could identify with a lot of it, and it looks like it'd probably be more effective than my standard workaround, which is Starbucks. So thank you. It makes it more fun when you learning can have a little bit of light touch. So you've been very inventive. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.